Book 101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest, one of her advocacy helping you find your voice and finally trust it. No other than Miss Mary Baker.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me today. This is great to be here.
Welcome, Miss Mary, on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure. I've been a life coach and a licensed counselor for about 22 ish years. And I work with mainly adults today. I have worked with kids in the past. And I
Mm-hmm.
work with individuals and I work with families and I work with relationships, mainly around good communication, healthy boundaries, and building great self confidence. Because even when I work with relationships and families, those are often some of the core issues.
Yes, and I like that, Miss Mary. Healthy boundaries. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about stop people pleasing, why we do it, and how we break free. Explore something new to yourself. And Miss Mary, as its core, people pleasing often starts as a childhood survival strategy. Can you describe the kind of environment at home, school, or with peers that typically plants the seed?
Sure. So, and oftentimes I want to start with saying it's not always the families who are violent or screaming and yelling all the time. More often, it's the quiet dysfunction in a family where the survival strategy gets learned very young because you notice that your safety depends on keeping everyone else happy. So maybe dad would be upset easily and you never knew when that was going to happen, or mom would shame you, or mom would get upset and cry. And so what you learn early on is you're responsible for keeping the peace. And what we need to remember is kids 10 and under are very egocentric. So there's no convincing them that everything happening around them isn't about them. When they get a
Hmm.
little older, they differentiate and that changes. And so they learn to subvert their own needs, their own boundaries, everything in order to parent please. So it starts out as survival because the unconscious belief is that if you're not making mom and or dad happy, you may not thrive. You might be abandoned. So it's that big fear of abandonment really that's the core driver. And so you learn and you also witness others in the family modeling being nice, being kind, not telling the truth, tiptoeing, walking on eggshells, that kind of thing. And so even loving families can unfortunately operate very passive aggressively. And even though they're loving and kind in a lot of moments, there's still that emotional instability. There's still that, I think, lack of emotional honesty at the dinner table. So the child doesn't really know how people truly feel or what is okay and what's not. So they have to observe and really, be weather people, like watch the weather and plan it out and make sure that they are loved and needed, perhaps, because, people pleasing goes into a lack of boundaries and also caretaking other people.
Miss Mary, many people pleasers believe that by keeping everyone happy, they can control their social environment and avoid conflict. How does this illusion of control actually backfire and create more anxiety?
Right. Wow. It can backfire in so many ways because control is an illusion. We think we have control and we really don't. We don't control anything outside of our own skin. Excuse me. So it will backfire because the other thing too is both people feel anxious because intuitively they feel like you're not really telling the truth, your truth. And so they don't feel safe and they can't do conflict in a healthy way with you because you need to have emotional honesty and transparency. You need truth. And then your own anxiety because you can't show up with a false self and be authentic. So then you have this internal fight. Half of you wants to tell the truth, and the other half is terrified of what might happen if you do. And so there's tremendous anxiety going on. And then the other thing, too, I think is really important is what we need to accept is that if we're going to people please, we can only do that for so long because we're building that bank account of resentment and it's going to leak out sideways. And none of us is exempt from this rule. We're going to end up getting very angry if things don't turn out well, and then we'll have some nasty conflict.
Hmm.
We won't have really great trust and transparency in the relationship. And so it it really ends up being the very prophecy that people are trying to avoid so badly.
Mhm. Well, Miss Mary, I want a bank account that with millions, not with resentment or whatever. For a chronic people pleaser, their sense of self worth becomes externally wired. How does someone begin to untangle their self from the service they provide to others?
Right. What I help people do is to first get in touch with what are they really thinking? What are they really feeling? Excuse me, what are they afraid to share? Because oftentimes that's their real truth. The truth that if they weren't afraid that they would speak and start to really work on what do they need? What are their feelings? Because so many people by the time they reach adolescence and adulthood don't even know what they feel anymore. They don't know what their needs are. They've been so disconnected. So it's a reconnection process first, and then practicing with safe people. How would you say that thing in a healthier way without people pleasing? What are all the variables there that you would want to practice? And then what I witness with clients is it starts to come out. They start to have situations where they speak it, and maybe not in a beautiful way at first, sometimes reactively, but I think our insides want to match our outsides. We want congruence. We really want to like who we are. We want to build that self trust. And so it's really getting in touch with what's really true for you versus what you might have been showing on the outside and why your truth is okay. I think that's a big part of the work in the beginning is lots of validation. Having people around you to tell you saying no is not selfish and mean. It's actually kinder and more honest, that kind of thing.
Hmm. Kinder and honest. Yes, we love that, people. If you had to name the top three core fears driving people pleasing behavior, what would they be, Miss Mary?
Well, I think the biggest one is abandonment. And that could be emotional abandonment when someone's in the room with you, but they've disconnected and they've withdrawn their love and approval.
Hmm.
And when we are, like you said a moment ago, externalizing our self worth, that can be a tremendous amount of fear. The second one is entrapment, that we're going to be stuck and we're not going to know how to escape. Again, if you've been people pleasing for years, you don't even know how yet to take care of yourself in a conversation. You don't know how to exit the conversation gracefully. So it's a lot of skill building, a lot of learning. Then the third one, I think, is and maybe I've kind of already explained that we are so afraid that we don't know what to do with an empowered us on the other side. We don't know yet. And again, that just plays into that fear of the unknown and trying to control outcomes is all about not being comfortable with the unknown. And so and I want to stop here and say, a lot of people have emotional trauma too. They have some serious situations that they grew up in. And so there's a lot of healing work to be done around
Hmm.
all three fears and really talking it through with safe people, hopefully in a group where they can reassure you that healthy people are not going to abandon you because you said no. In fact, they want you to. Healthy people are not going to trap you. In fact, they're going to help you have closure to the conversation. They're going to validate you. And healthy people are going to model and teach you and encourage you as you learn to become someone who speaks more of your truth.
Miss Mary, we often focus on the stress of people pleasing, but what about the corrosive build up and resentment towards others for expecting it and towards ourselves for allowing it? How does it resentment manifest?
I think resentment has a lot to do with unresolved grief. So, hear me out. And so, if I'm resentful, I'm focused out there on the other person, let's say, and I'm focused on that outcome. I'm focused on what they're doing, not doing, what I want them to do, what I want to happen, what I'm afraid will happen. And so, we know deep down we really don't have control over that. So, if it doesn't go perfectly, which it doesn't, we start to build resentment because we're giving them all the power over our well being. We're doing conditional phrases such as, I'll feel okay as long as everyone thinks I'm fabulous today. I'll be fine if no one is upset with me. I'll be so happy if I can schmooze that person into doing what I want them to do, basically. And so that resentment is unresolved grief because the opposite of that is going and kicking and screaming to acceptance around what the reality might truly be. Like if I stop people pleasing with this person, I might have to end that relationship if they're really unhealthy. I might have to go work for a healthier boss. And so there's impending loss and there's that letting go of control, that surrender. And so the last piece that you mentioned was how we feel about ourselves. That's one of the hardest things to forgive is ourselves. But ironically, that becomes a part of that grief work and that healing, where as you people please less and let yourself feel things more, I think it's easier to forgive ourselves. I think self confidence really is about getting things straight on the inside of us. At the end of the day, it ends up not being about anyone else. It's about, did I ask for what I really needed? Did I say yes when I meant yes, no when I meant no? Did I talk about how I really feel and what I really want and what I really think? Am I making it real by putting that out there in the world?
Miss Mary, what is a long term cost to our relationships when we are constantly present a curated, agreeable version of ourselves instead of our true, authentic one?
Right? I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he was the one who came up with the drama triangle, which is the basis of any epic movie, let's say, or story. And that, let's say, this part of the bottom of the triangle is the damsel in distress, the person who needs to be rescued. Up here is the bad guy, the perpetrator, and over here is, the superhero going to save her and get the bad guy. The problem is that if we're this person hanging on the cross, we begin to martyr, we build that resentment that you and I just talked about, and eventually we become the persecutor. And that is really hard for loving, caring, people pleasing people to admit. But you do, right? Because
Yes.
eventually you start, I mean, you're stacking dynamite. It's going to blow. It's going to blow in the worst way. You're going to say things you would love to take back. But here's the kicker. So instead of doing the work, setting the boundaries, stop manipulating all the things. You just keep going round and round and round until something will really give. And long term, what I've witnessed is people leave relationships, they upend families, marriages, mortgages, all the things. They don't know how to do that healthy. They end up stepping out of a relationship because they haven't been authentic and someone else listens to what they need. So those are the big long-term costs, but the final one is to our health. And we need to understand, and I think we're doing a better job now of looking at the correlations between anxiety and stress and emotional trauma and long-term chronic illness, inflammation, heart disease, anxiety and depression. We didn't even talk about that. I mean, those are almost a definite. And I watch those disappear as people work on their boundaries and
Mm.
everything. So it's really cool. And I watch their physical health get better.
getting better and better and better through the help of Miss Mary. So, what will be your short term and long term goals? Helping people.
Short term is I want to get more of my information out there. I've spent many years working with people on how do you do this? How do you stop becoming a people pleaser? How do you set boundaries? How do you create healthier relationships with yourself first and with others? What are all of those pieces? And I've learned the hard way over the years doing individuals and then doing empowerment groups for both men and women that there are certain pieces to the puzzle that we need. So right now, just really trying to get that out there and have more people join the coaching groups that I have because I love watching the change happen in those. It's so cool to watch people help each other grow, and it's sustained growth. Long term, I'd like to have my course reach more people. There's so many times, Daniel, where I sit with people either as a counselor or a coach, and they say, Mary, I've been to quite a few counselors over the years. No one's talking about this. Why are they not talking about it?
Hmm.
And that was my struggle years ago. I did a lot of this work on myself, and I had a hard time finding resources and finding people who are really working on this. Now I think it's more in the milieu. Now I think it's more commonplace, and I think that's wonderful because if I help one person get healthier, everyone in their life is impacted by that and generations to come if we want to be dramatic, right? Their kids and their grandkids and their great grandkids. So it's just a really cool thing to be able to put out there and see people grow and see their lives change. That's why I do this work.
Yes, and good luck to your goals, Miss Mary, and looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you as a
Can you
coach?
repeat that? Sorry.
Will you? What would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be coach like you?
I think know if you're ready. And even if you're almost ready, that's okay. I believe that it would not be put on your radar to start working on this stuff if you weren't almost ready. And you just need the love and the encouragement and support. And you just need a safe place to do the work and just some commitment. And it will keep showing up on your radar and the process will guide you.
Hmm. Yes. And thank you for that advice, Miss Mary. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
One of the, and it's a newer book on people pleasing because people pleasing was talked about a lot, but there wasn't a specific book. And it's Harriet Braker, Braker, called The Disease to Please. It's a great book, and here's why. Not only does she do a beautiful job of normalizing it and taking all the shame out of why you might be into people pleasing, but there are parts of the book where she makes you go out and work on it. Because if you people please, you're an avoidant person too. And so you can sit in rooms and talk about this till the cows come home and not do a darn thing to work on it. So I really like it how she brings it into some tactical things to practice in the book. Because again, like I said before, we need to know how. We need to know how to do it differently, how to show up differently. So I love her book. I recommend it to clients all the time, and they really find it helpful.
Thank you for that recommended book, Miss Mary. And how can someone apply these principles in a professional setting where there are real power dynamics without jeopardizing their career?
Yeah, see, that's a trickier one, right? Because you're speaking truth to power if that's your boss per se.
Mm-hmm.
I think working on first building that relationship with that person so that you build some emotional trust appropriately in the workplace and you use a lot of empathy and a lot of leadership. And I teach a lot of leadership. And you come across as authentic as you can, but also emotionally available. You're taking time to listen to them, all the Stephen Covey stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
First things first, build relationship first. He was right. And try to find out where they're coming from If they're your employees, work on growing people. Work on who you are, who you bring to the table. What are your gifts? What are your healthy things that you're working on? Do you have really good boundaries? If you're struggling with people pleasing, get a coach to help you around that in certain situations, because I want to be careful. I don't want to just make blanket statements. Some situations are trickier than others. But I've watched clients do this, and oftentimes if they work on their personal stuff, they end up then looking at the job and saying, "Oh gosh, I really want to show up differently there too." And it's neat to help them start to do that. You just want to be careful in the workplace because, again, that's your paycheck, that's your career. You may not
Yes.
be able to be as forthcoming as you would with your best friend.
Hmm. Yes, definitely. And Miss Mary, when someone consistently practice these new behaviors, what is the new sense of freedom or peace that they ultimately gain?
Wow, I could talk all day about that. So, the one thing that really starts to subside is that internal fight that we talked about a minute ago, where they're not fighting themselves as much anymore. And they also, as they put more of themselves out into the world and hopefully get some healthier mirroring around that, where you make sense, what you think and need and feel makes sense, and your boundaries make sense. I think that is really healing. And then all of the belongingness that they get with the right people. So that brings a sense of peace and a sense of groundedness. Because remember, we started out talking about growing up, trying to people please, trying to survive. That is all fear based. But when we get into choice based, where we take a risk and say, "I'm so sorry, I can't go tonight, I'm really busy," and we risk losing someone in order to have a healthy connection instead, then I
Hmm.
think we have a lot less anxiety. Our brains aren't as vigilant looking for danger, because where we're looking instead is on the inside more. And the crazy irony of that is, as we do that more, we have better empathy for other people. We actually see people with more compassion.
Mhm.
So just lots and lots of good stuff come from it.
Definitely. Empathy, empathy, people. And Miss Mary, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season. Abstract poetry in second season. I'm a book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in third season. I'm a food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101, and music 101 are in fourth season. Science 101, Sex 101 in second season of my baby podcast. Law 101, Mental Health 101, and Bible Verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Mary, to bring it home, what was the most difficult personal people pleasing habit you had to break? And what was the key that finally unlocked the freedom for you?
I would have to say someone's anger. I grew up
Hmm.
with a dad who was a very big man with a very loud voice. He wasn't mean at all, but he had a big booming voice. And so the magic was loving detachment, separating what was about me and what was about him, and not making it about me. And also, the other big piece too was realizing what were the costs of not risking this person being upset, and just doing the detachment work, that just because they're upset doesn't mean I'm wrong. Just because they're upset doesn't mean it has to be the end of our relationship. Right? Because I think when you
Yes.
struggle with boundaries, everything is blurred together. And so I do so much of that work within myself and with clients, and I just find that to be really magical.
Well, Miss Mary Baker, thank you so much for the power of possible source. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. They can listen to my podcast, which is Own It with Mary Baker, and it's the Own It Powercast that they can find wherever they get their podcasts. That is an audio podcast. And then findyourvoicecourse.com or hit my website here, Sora's Mary Baker. I have that course, which is a wonderful online learning piece. You have me there to support you. There's group coaching. It's awesome. Then I have some smaller courses, some that are free, some that are very inexpensive, where they can get started with boundaries, get started with starting to understand what's going on and how they can work on things like people pleasing and self confidence.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Mary Baker because if you support her for sure, more and more empowering episodes of the podcast, more and more empowering advocacy will rise. So, Miss Mary, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. This was great.
More to come, people. See you soon.